Good afternoon and welcome to this ORF Fellows Seminar Series. This series we do once in 2 months where we discuss the research publication from the ORF faculty and we give them the opportunity to present forward the research finding, but also have it also discussion with the peer scholars as well as academics to also take forward the research findings. So I'm very glad to do this seminar for Dr. Chaitanya Giri's paper, which is towards controlled growth of the Indian space economy, which I believe is your first research paper for the Observer Research Foundation. So congratulations on that. But this is also very exciting times for India's space sector. We have Group Captain Shubham Shukla on the Axiom 4 mission today, since last week, and that has really again, cultivated the interest in what India is doing in the space sector, both globally as well as domestically. So I think a critical part of that is also the space economy in terms of what India needs to do to really grow this sunrise sector as such. So without any further distinction, I'll give it to Advait, our moderator, to take forward the discussion. Advait.
Good afternoon. I am Advait Kulkarni, founder of Vasundhara Jet Technologies and also the founder of Earthside Foundation. We do many things in the downstream ecosystem. I'll introduce my panel for the day. Shri Surendra Vaidyaji is sitting next to me. He's the tech advisor of Godrej Aerospace, and we've had the great privilege of working with him under his guidance in the Pune and Mumbai subdomain and for many things, especially in the upcoming aerospace sector. Then we have Mr. Varun Khandare, who is the founder of Strategic Research and Growth Foundation. Together, we have been championing a lot of things, especially on the capacity building side. So I must say that he's one of the champions of the bridge between the industry needs and what the academia can offer, and of course, so much more. Devlina here, my fellow downstream champion, who's been doing a lot in the blue economy also that I know of, and recently the founder of Climacrew, and Tanushri, who is an independent space lawyer, but I personally know she's a lot more than that. So as we get to our discussion, we'll get in details of what each one of us does and how we want to see this ecosystem grow. But for now, I think I'll leave it to Chaitanya for his presentation.
Firstly, thank you all very much to come to our premises on this Monday afternoon amidst your busy schedule. This is perhaps the first time that we are speaking about space economy in Bandra Kurla complex. Okay, and that's actually a big thing, not because it is we who are doing it at ORF, but because the complex is a major finance hub, not just for India, but for the whole of Asia. And in the pathway of India becoming the third largest economy in the next few years, this particular ecosystem is going to play a major role. The BKC ecosystem is known for fintech. It is known for digital technologies. You've seen in the premises where we are in. But it has an untapped potential to be in the space sector. And of course, we can't compete with Bangalore. We can't compete with Hyderabad because they've been far ahead. They've enjoyed the presence of DRDO and ISRO labs in their vicinity, which ISRO doesn't have that. Mumbai doesn't have that because ISRO, although the genesis was here, but it eventually moved out into the more cooler climates of Bangalore and Hyderabad than the sultry ones of Mumbai. But Mumbai nevertheless holds an edge, and that edge comes from the economic understanding of space. The space sector for a very long time was tightly glued in the hands of the Indian government for almost 50 years. And in these 50 years, whatever achievements that you see in the space sector that the country has achieved have come because of tremendous nexuses between a select group of really committed commercial space companies who have designed systems, subsystem components, or the whole systems for ISRO. And we have one amongst them here in the form of Godrej Aerospace, again a proudly Mumbai company, a Maharashtra company. So, they've been around for that long. And then suddenly, during the pandemic, when things were lull, there was not much going around. That is when the government took a long pending decision of uh, opening up the space sector from the confines of the government labs and tapping into the talent that resides in outside ISRO labs, to be precise. So companies who are able to, or talent that was able to build rockets, satellites, spacecraft, small component systems, offer cutting edge services at competitive and globally competitive price points and globally competitive technological edges, they were given a leeway, a latitude to come and be part of India's space journey. Why was that? Because sometime around 2010-11, when the SpaceX phenomenon started happening, there was an understanding that going forward, space won't just be part of any country's military aspirations or or even civilian aspirations, but it will be a medium where economic gains could be made. And that's the reason why the term space economy came into being around that time in our governmental parlance. In Indian government's dictionary, that word made prominent presence felt. So this happened during 2020 pandemic, and in 2022 something more happened when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, during her budget speech, that particular budget speech of that year, she used the word space economy as a sunrise sector quite predominantly, and there is a half a page in the budget speech text which is dedicated to what exactly is space economy and what exactly is a sunrise sector. So space was identified as a sunrise sector, which means that there is a lot of potential, hidden potential in this domain. And just the way we discuss these days AI, robotics, just the way space is one of the sunrise sectors, but it is far more than what you deem about it, what you assume about it. And that's why the title, towards controlled growth of economy, because these days whatever you manufacture, whatever you synthesize or come up with, even if it is a service, then in such cases you need to ensure that the intellectual property that comes along with it, that needs to be protected. Because if we don't protect the intellectual property, then it will be a major loss. It will be a loss not only just for the company but for the nation, because space for any country is a strategic sector. Even if commercialization has been encouraged in India at this moment, it still continues to be a strategic sector. Just that the strategic interests are now distributed between ISRO and the commercial sector, which is growing in its periphery. That's the reason why the title of this paper was The Controlled Growth of Indian Space Economy. So this presentation will quickly follow the structure. Firstly, in the interest of the students that have gathered here, what are sunrise sectors? Number two, why is the space economy in India considered as a sunrise sector? Number three, what kind of international validation for space sector reforms and missing elements have been identified? Now that the reforms were undertaken in 2020, has the world recognized these reforms? This is something will come up in point number three. And then there are three recommendations which you will get to know as I go ahead. So there are two types of economic sectors that we come across, whatever field you may be in, chemicals, manufacturing, mechanical, biological, anything. One is a sunset sector and one is a sunrise sector. Sunset sector is nothing but something that is incumbent. It is right now, right here, existing. It has matured well. There are a lot of jobs in there. It is contributing heavily to the economy, and it has entrenched itself into the economic landscape of any country. So that is sunset. And something that is emerging is known as sunrise. What are type of companies in sunset? Usually it is established companies, listed companies, multinational corporations. They have presence, kind of registered all across the world. Whereas largely in sunrise sectors, it is the startups. Largely, if not all, there could be MSMEs, SMEs, part of it. Size of companies, if that is the attribute to take into consideration, sunset sector has a large flow of talent. So just like IT, you have a large flow of talent in India. So you get churned in universities, colleges, and that churned talent gets eventually distributed across various companies. It could be Geo, TCS, whatnot, Infosys, whatnot. So large talent pool is very well channelized. Finances are also very well channelized because there are mechanisms that are proven, and of course with technology. Whereas with sunrise sector, people invest in startups because they are looking for that rapid spurt of growth, a big return on small investments that you are making. So that's how the distinguishing factor is. Financially, which of these are attractive? Sunset sectors are attractive to establish investment pathways. Your sovereign funds, this, that, they are very much interested in them. Venture capitalists are interested in sunrise companies. So that's why we see investments. Political influence, of course, you have industry bodies, major, Mumbai has, Pune has, CII, FICCI, they all are very well attuned to what the industry needs are. And these industry needs are very well communicated with state governments, the central government. But that's not the case with sunrise sector. Sunrise sectors have limited influence. They need a lot of guardianship. They need a handholding, and handholding to an extent that you don't be nannies to them, but yet at the same time you create favorable mechanisms for them to grow, because it is in their growth lies the country's strategic interests. And finally, you have associated risks, social and economic stability. You don't let a company flourish. You don't let a company, establish operations just the way it happens in certain states. Those are the risks, labor unions, this and that. Whereas in sunrise sectors, they are susceptible to economic bubbles. So if you look at 2008 financial crisis, there was hardly any more money flowing into startups. That money into startups started flowing as the world moved away from that bubble burst. And then there is another bubble burst on the cards. So in such situations, the startups, at least for the foreseeable 3-4 years, are going to face tremendous turbulence, if not a loss of support. So they're susceptible to that. They need handholding from time to time from variety of experts. And startups are also working in policy voids. There are major gaps in which they operate.
Yeah.
So policies need to be created concurrently with the growth of these startups. So there is no established rules and regulations in place. So that's the case. So as I spoke about the 2022 budget speech, it had 6 sunrise sectors, along with including space economy, healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Because we just came out of COVID, we realized that what is the enormous potential that is lying there, and that's how it was chosen. Agro and food processing is another big sector. Renewable energy, including green hydrogen, electric vehicles, electronics and semiconductors. We'll stick to space economy today. So what is space economy? If you look at this particular diagram, you will find that there are 2 words that are being used. The larger set is known as the space economy, whereas space industry is just this particular Venn diagram, where you have upstream and downstream. So Advait's company and Devlina's company, they work in the downstream sector, where satellite images or satellite-based data is processed and delivered to a diverse set of end users. It could be end users from environmental services, energy and minerals, agriculture, fishing, agribusiness, maritime. Then, so both of these companies are into Earth observation. Then there are SATCOM companies. What do SATCOM companies do? They are primarily into transmission of internet, transmission of broadcasting services, broadcasting for civilian, transmission services for military as well as civilian. So end users define their niches, and these niches are delivered by companies based on the market potential and based on the market they are allowed to operate in. So GPS and satellite is one use case. Then there are public users. Public user is nothing but the government itself, which is procuring the data from you. That includes wildfires. There's a wildfire right now going around in California, a major one. So maybe NASA would be generating certain data set, or companies like there are companies by the name of Maxar and Planet, they could be contributing with data. US government is procuring it to ensure that these wildfires do not spread and do not cause further damage than whatever they've caused. So that is one, and essential services provision. So in totality, this is space economy, whereas whatever is getting manufactured in upstream and whatever is being offered is just constitutes as space industry. So the words are different. It can't be used interchangeably. So until now, until 2020, in India's case, whereas in the Western context, the perspective is slightly different. We were in something known as Space 1.0. Space 1.0 is nothing but this narrow domain where you have government offering certain services, and there are commercial companies who are offering certain services exclusively to the government. So what was government doing? Government was providing you GPS services. Okay. In traditional Space 1.0, before 2020 or before 2010, a lot of space missions going to Mars, Moon, this planet, that planet was all sponsored by government based on taxpayer money. Military satellites, of course, government. Earth observation satellites, partly they were being offered by commercial companies and partly it was built by space agencies like ISRO, NASA, European Space Agency, so on and so forth. And human spaceflight. There was no commercial space tourism up until Space 1.0. So all the astronauts that you saw going up in space were all government sponsored. Even in what Samir mentioned a few moments ago, there's this very peculiar thing about Shubhanshu Shukla's mission. Shubhanshu Shukla is an Indian Air Force wing commander, a group captain. Right? Group captain. We paid a certain sum of money to Axiom, which is to a tune of few $100 million, and that money would go into him being sent to the ISS. So taxpayer money getting driven to a commercial company. That commercial company is Axiom in this case, and Axiom is piggybacking him, taking him, ride-sharing him to the International Space Station. Why did we spend that money? Because tomorrow when we have our own space station up there, which is known as the Bharatiya Antariksh Station, we now have the basic know-how of what to do, an experiential know-how, because these experiences are quite expensive. So we now have an experiential know-how. Whatever is being learned, not only by Shubhanshu Shukla, but also by the backup astronauts, will go into the next phase. And this is just the first class of astronauts. Subsequently, every 5 to 10 years, there will be classes of astronauts. Classes as in just the way you go to colleges. So class of this year, class of 83, class of 93, all that. So this is the first class of Indian astronauts. The second class will benefit from the learnings that the first class derives. So that was human spaceflight earlier and completely in the governmental domain, but now human spaceflight, space tourism, as I've written over here, it has been commercialized. So Space 1.0 was roughly $300 billion global market. The potential is by 2040, Space 2.0, which is the new way of going into space, new way of commercially operating in space, could reach up to $3 trillion globally. Now, if you really want to have a pie of that particular massive spurt of growth, then you would need to understand what are the do's and don'ts for us. So it is not just about liberating the Indian economy, space economy, but also taking the necessary steps to ensure that there is a healthy growth. So it's not just about delivering a baby, but keep feeding the baby, keep nurturing the baby so that the baby grows into a nice, healthy adult, a wise adult. So that's how we are going to proceed. So I won't go in details. There are certain technologies which have been matured, some are maturing, and some are still nascent. What is nascent? Space habitats. We still have to set up bases on the moon or on asteroids or that. Space resource extraction, which is mining, it is still nascent. It still has some time to go. But rest of the things are getting heavily commercialized, and they will contribute heavily to both the global as well as Indian space economy, and Indian companies need to be part of that growth story. I just mentioned these are the attributes of the reforms that took place. We want to make India self-reliant in the space sector. Private sector participation in space activities were approved in 2020. Thereafter, even the Ministry of Defense came up with something known as Mission Def Space, where certain class of defense-oriented space technologies were procured by the same set of companies who were offering civilian services. So Indian startups do not just offer services to the civilian sector, but also to the military. Okay, so that is one case. Again, there were several encouraging steps taken by the government. 100% FDI in space. There is a government-backed PC fund which is now worth 1,000 crores, and there is an additional one which is now worth 500 CR. So in total, there are 1,500 crores worth of venture capital related funds offered by the government through investment banks like SIDBI, which are now offered to Indian startups. So a lot of encouraging is happening, but encouragement is not enough. So are our startups right now internationally validated? Are people acknowledging? Are countries across the world acknowledging us? Yes, they are. I'll give you one example. This is a project known as Space Maitri. It's an Indo-Australian project where Australia is wanting to tap into Indian competencies of building a spacecraft, a satellite, operating it, and also depending on the talent, which may not work in Indian companies but may work in Australian companies in Australia, or Australian companies that are registered here in India. So there's this one company known as Space Machines. It's an Australian company but with heavy Indian workforce. They have an office in Bangalore, they have an office in Adelaide in Australia. Together, they're coming up with a jointly built spacecraft, which is shown over here, Optimus. And these are the Indian entities that are present: Digantara, Anant, NSIL, ISRO. And the ones that are mentioned here are all Australian participants. Had we not been good, we wouldn't have worked together. So ISRO and NSIL just facilitating the launch. They are offering the satellite, the space launch vehicle, whereas Anant is helping with the construction of the spacecraft along with Space Machines company. The good part is there are think tanks involved in this. So Australian Strategic Policy Institute is working on the Australian side to ensure that smooth policy making and smooth strategic analysis. ORF intends to play a similar role. So space diplomacy from the commercial perspective is happening in a very strong manner. But this is not it. This is not enough. India's space economy targets have certain missing elements. We are not yet exporting. We are building, we've started to build. It is too early, but it is not late enough for us to not think about these aspects, that we need to build something to export. You can't be having over dependence on domestic markets. And today, if the government is saying that we are at 2% of the global space economy, and by 2047, if you wish to increase the global share, our share in the global space economy up to 15%, in that case, exports are a must. And for that very reason, this particular study of mine, it makes three slightly apparently unrelated, but I found them quite relative to each other, recommendations. First recommendation is that you must protect the innovation that is happening in the country. innovation by design, innovation by the kind of if it is an invention, if it is a new material, if it's a new metallurgy, if it is a new chemical that is being used, if it is a new software altogether, AI-enabled software, if it is a new AI-enabled satellite which can move on its own autonomously without any sort of command and control from the earth. That's a new invention altogether. You need to protect that kind of stuff, because if you don't, then you are at a strategic loss. And for that to happen, there needs to be a restructuring of a certain aspect which we usually don't pay attention to. And that fact is, for a very long time, India's biggest exports were commodities, metals, minerals, ores, spices, other semi-polished goods, your pharmaceuticals. These are very easy to define products. A pharmaceutical compound is a pharmaceutical compound. It can't be anything else. But with space technology, it can be anything. It can be an AI product. It can be a fuel for rockets, space grade fuel, a space grade solar panel for satellites. It could be anything. So the diversity of space products is massive. Even in a single rocket or in a single satellite or a spacecraft, you have too many components that go in there. So for that very reason, you need to. So this was one of the recommendations of the paper, that you need to create a new space items category in India's export control list. What is an export control? It's a list of items that we tend to evaluate before it is allowed to get exported. So that export control list of ours is known as SCOMET. It's an abbreviation. And abbreviation for special chemicals, organisms, materials, equipments, and technologies. We may not have taken it seriously earlier. Our bandwidth of seriousness about that list may have been really narrow. But as India progresses, as we build high technologies, this will come into picture quite regularly. So this list is maintained by the Ministry of Commerce, which works under parameters of India's foreign trade policy. The first foreign trade policy was notified in 1992. We got our independence in 1947. Okay, we've been that slow. And then there were certain amendments that were made in 2010, where central government began to monitor SCOMET items and started amending the list, because there were new innovations that were coming after the economic liberalization. We needed to protect that. So amendments were made in 2010. So what am I saying here? These are the interministerial committees members that are part of this DGFT committee. Ministry of External Affairs, Department of Defense Production, DRDO, ISRO, Chemicals and Petrochemicals, National Authority of Chemical Weapons Convention, and Cabinet Secretariat. What needs to happen now is, all these committee members, all these ministries and agencies are governing some of these SCOMET item categories. Okay? Item number 1, toxic chemical agents and other chemicals, microorganisms and toxins, materials, processing equipment and related technologies, so on and so forth. All those that are marked in that DGFT IMC code are governed by that committee. Atomic Energy Department, which sits right here in Mumbai, is totally in control of category number 0, which is nuclear materials. Okay. Then there is number 6, which is known as the munitions list, which includes all the explosive weapons. There, Department of Defense Production is totally in control of governing the exports. There is no category for space products in SCOMET list, because all this while, space technology for us was either a spacecraft or a rocket. We weren't manufacturing spacecraft for anyone, so it wasn't the case. Rockets were exactly in the same category as munitions. That needs to change now. And that's why one recommendation is that you'll have to create a category number 9, which is mentioned here, and look at the diversity of the products that may go into that. Space technologies, space-grade materials, space-grade electronics, satellite communication systems, orbital guidance and maneuvering systems, ground infrastructure, propulsion, launch vehicles, softwares, IT, precision timing, space habitats, space stations, whatnot. The list is massive and we don't have a category for it. Recommendation number 2. So if you are a business house, if you're manufacturing something or even offering services, the moment you make an invoice, okay, for receiving the payments, that invoice, on that invoice, you have to mention something known as the HSN code. The HSN code for that service you're offering or the technology that you are building. And there are defined numbers for it. Now the problem is, there is no single number in HSN code which is catering to space technologies. Space technology code can be anything, and there are 99 codes. I'll explain, and those 99 codes have further 6 to 8 digit differentiation. Okay. Now, why am I asking for the revision? Because a lot of technologies from the yesteryears, especially from Space 1.0, which was earlier restricted even by the United States, is no more restricted. What they are saying is, since 2024, last year, October 24, that some of the old space technologies, including launch vehicles, will be now relaxed. We won't place great emphasis on their controls under a commerce control list that the government has released. And then there are new set of technologies, especially metal alloy additive manufacturing, quantum technology, semiconductor manufacturing, certain transistors which are semiconductors. They will now be part of export control, American export controls. So certain technologies will outgrow their presence in an export control list. So you'll have to take them out. Whatever becomes obsolete or whatever becomes too common, you need not protect it. So that needs to be left out. And then there are certain new technologies that need to be brought into a list. So this export control list also gets updated regularly. So this is what the Americans have done. And now, what is happening? 20th century heritage space technology, which is in today's times low on technical complexity, is being relaxed, whereas emerging and critical technologies that are fused with space technology, they are going into the controls domain. So this is a ever-changing process. It will change from time to time, maybe not frequently, maybe not on the scale of 5 to 10 years, but always on the scale of 50, 60, 70 years. Every 50, 60, 70 years, things will start changing. And we are right at the precipice where we need to give away some of the ISRO heritage technologies and let ISRO build something really avant-garde, and also let the Indian commercial space companies build something really cutting edge and be part of that, because that is where the money is to be made. Now, if I am to come across a news where a MiG-21 of certain country's origin was held in Thiruvananthapuram airport, who cares about MiG-21? It got stranded, it was left there. But a F-35 is stranded there at Trivandrum airport, big deal. So what is getting stranded? A new technology, which we don't have our hands on. Exactly the same way, whatever is new in terms of technological evolution needs to be protected. I spoke to you about HSN code. HSN code is practiced all over the world. It is enshrined by the World Customs Organization, WCO. And this is how the classification number of every product is. The first 2 digits are the chapter. The second 2 digits are the heading. third two are subheadings, and then there are local classification numbers. How will I distinguish between a satellite exclusively made for military and a satellite made for civilian purposes? How am I going to distinguish something that is made for agriculture and something made for marine systems? Unless we build it, we are not going to come across these problems, and we are going to start building it. So we'll come across this particular problem. So for instance, I'll give you an example. In 2-digit, there is a HS code chapter number 88. The description of that chapter is, it includes everything which is in the category of aircraft, spacecrafts and parts thereof. Now if I go to its 4-digit variant, 8801, 8802, so on and so forth, all related to aircraft and spacecraft, and there is no attribution to spacecraft in this particular category. Then in 6-digit, you have a description of spacecraft and launch vehicles, and there is nothing on 8-digit. Now I told you already the diversity of space products. It can be anything. How would you distinguish between one space product from the other? So this is a major challenge that is up on our hands, which means that the classification system that was inculcated back in 1982 with this HS code has become already obsolete. It needs to be changed. Now HS number 99, for example, includes optical, photographic, cinematographic, measuring, checking, precision, medical, surgical instruments and apparatus. So a company making cinema cameras, or camera that we are getting shot on right now, its HS code and the HS code of a camera that is used on a satellite is the same. This is a commercially viable product. You would want to sell it in millions. You wouldn't want to sell a sensitive satellite camera for millions volumes, numbers. So that's where the consternation is coming from. So what are we saying? That there is, in this particular case, there is no scope for representation of diverse payloads. A payload that is beaming signals for watching, let's say, a football match happening in Brazil. That thing and anything that is measuring something that is happening in Pahalgam or in Riyasi, why is it in the same category? It can't be. So that's why there needs to be further distinguishing factors. Coming to the second last slide. World Customs Organization, they amend their HS list every few years. Now this is part of diplomacy. This is part of commercial diplomacy. This has nothing to do with space. Every few years, WCO, which is the global standardizer of tariff schedules for goods and services, creates a new nomenclature. At present, there are nearly 5,600 HS codes, and these are all amendable lists. So every new product gets added in some HS category every few years. There are 211 member countries in this particular organization, India being also the one. What does WCO do? It ensures integrity of supply chains. So especially during the pandemic, people were unsure about supplies of vaccines. So there were certain vaccines which were meant only for animals, and certain vaccines which were meant for us. They were clubbed in the same category. And that was creating a lot of hindrances when it came to providing humanitarian support. So that was the first time when we realized, actually during times of crisis, that no, these kind of issues need to be addressed during peacetime when everything is nice and hunky and dory. Otherwise, in times of crisis, you wouldn't know what to do and how many amendments you need to make, because consensus happens rarely, and this is not a time when international community is having consensus on many topics and issues. So WCO ensures supplies of humanitarian assistance. So, what is the case that India should make to the WCO, considering the recommendations that I am making here? That 2 years ago, a new HS code was made for electronic waste. You've done that. You made a code for electronic waste. Smartphones were given a new HS code only in 2022. Smartphones have been around for so many years. The HS code for a typical landline and a smartphone was the same. Whereas smartphone was doing many more things than a typical phone would do. That thing took so long, 2022. In 2022 amendment, there was a new code for heavy duty vehicles with full or partial electric motors. There is new amendment list coming up in 2028, 3 years from now. We don't know what is in it, but there are new 211 classifications, 23 amendments, 18 classification decisions related to climate change, global security threats, global health crisis, and trade disruptions. Don't you think there could be space technology anywhere in there? There will be. And that's why what I'm saying is, when 2034 recommendations are or re-evaluation amendments are to come, we must prepare a case to consolidate all the space technologies into one or few HS categories. It can't be scattered all across 99. It needs to be consolidated. World Customs Organization is yet not noticing the terminology space economy. OECD releases reports. World Economic Forum talks about space economy. Governments across the world are talking about space economy, but WCO is not. How can that be? So that needs to be noticed. Another thing, within the United Nations, which WCO is part of, WCO doesn't talk to the Outer Space Affairs Office of UN. So there is hardly any conversation between the two. And the only partnership that they just created was between European Space Agency and WCO, but for internal European matters. So finally, to conclude, regardless of India's space sector progress post 2020 reforms, our space exports have not been tapped. We are still not looking at it, but we must do it fast because the window for doing that is closing very quickly. There is a need for a strategy for space sector exports in the face of global economic turbulence. Our space companies may not be receiving certain technologies because of maybe sanctions. The countries that we find favorable to us may sanction us. What do you do in that instance? In such instance, and we've experienced that in the past. ISRO, DRDO were under sanctions until recently, until some 10 years ago. It might happen again. So what do we do that? Where is the money going to come from? Where is the investment going to come from? Where is the raw material going to come from? And where is the market going to come from? So if you want to really keep the sector brimming and healthy, you need to ensure newer countries where you can sell your products, services. Africa, Middle East, Oceania region, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, South America. You need to look at these markets. Space technology cooperation needed for India standing in global south. Because if you don't grow in terms of your space competencies, you won't be respected. Because Africa is already on its way. There are many African countries who are getting their first satellites built. They may not have the full spectrum technologies like Russia, US, China, or India for that matter, but they have slowly begun it. You will have to compete with the Europeans or the North Americans in providing them cost-effective services, cost-effective technologies. Have a quid pro quo, have some arrangement, but engage with them. These are exports. And for those kind of exports to happen, especially in countries which are economically a bit on a shaky ground, you need to ensure that these issues related to exports, they need to be ironed out. Space technology control is needed to play the great power game. The moment you grow beyond whatever economic stature you have right now, you're the fifth largest economy. You're already in the great power game. And to play that game, you have to use your cards wisely. This is a big card. You can call it a king card, you can call it an ace, but it is a card to play very carefully. It will make or break. So space is that. And although we learn, there are agencies in place that the government has formulated or established in the past 5-6 years, but we are very slow learners. So we need to learn really fast. So all the startup growth story was just 10 years ago. We now need to ensure that our startups do not remain startup anymore. Many of them graduate to the next stages, earn revenues, be profitable, employ as many people as they can, and only then we will have something positive to register and a very strong card to play in the great power game. This is all for the great power game, nothing else. Thank you. That's it.
The great power game indeed. I think just before, if I can change the format a little, before I go to the panel, I'll just have a quick question for you, Chaitanya. Is there a difference between the commercialized space sector and the privatized space sector, especially in India? So, commercial space sector and private space sector, are these two interchangeable words?
No.
Or these are two different concepts?
These are two different concepts. So just last week or 10 days ago, when Hindustan Aeronautics Limited was given when it won the bid for building the small satellite launch vehicle, the SSLV, I was asked the same question by Mint.
Oh, I didn't get it from there.
So Mint asked me, but this is a dent on privatization. I said no. Look at the development. You had 3 bidders. Out of those, one was a pure play state-owned enterprise in the form of HAL. The other 2 bidders were consortium of 3-2 companies, which came together for that bid. They were made to bid. They bidded. They competed on that bid, and that's a big success. All this has happened within 5 years. It was government's prerogative to give the contract to HAL because it is always better to have one single company to do business with rather than a consortium which has never worked in the past. So think from that perspective, number one. Number two, if SSLV is going to HAL, it may be the case that PSLV may not go to HAL because there is another bigger rocket to be privatized. Again, you have private companies there. Sir would know, was into thick of that action. So, and then you have a completely different segment. So, what has happened with HAL contract is commercialization. It can't be called as privatization because HAL is not a private sector company. It's a state-owned enterprise. But had it gone to any of the other 2 consortia bidders, it would have been called as privatization. It is happening. See, the big thing is the government, which was very much under socialist mindset for many decades, it allowing something like this to happen is a major achievement. And let us start with commercialization and gradually we'll play the big.
So, if I understand from your presentation, and also from your answer right now, it means that stable supply chains, somebody who can maintain a stable supply chain would be a better positioned player, at least at this point,
yes,
to handle such projects. And also what you have brought out is space effectively. I mean, all of us know that space effectively is a global playground or more than a global playground, which means that the global boys and girls need to be fair when they are playing on this playground. Which means that again supply chain becomes a critical part because we don't have the capacity of handling the entire supply chain. So with that, I would like to ask you, is when we are building these new age companies or new age enterprises, I won't call them startups because effectively most of them aren't. But we are heavily dependent on these very convoluted supply chains, which become extremely critical at one point of time. And then, what are your recommendations or your observations to begin with, where the new age enterprises need to be careful of or be prepared for?
So before I answer, can I just
Yes, sir.
Give my opinion on your previous question to Chaitanya? I think what you said is probably wrong. I mean, consortium does exist, and we were the first ones in '89 to come out with a consortium with MTR Hyderabad. And that time, T.N. Seshan, the very famous our election commissioner, he was just on his verge of completing his tenure from ISRO and moving to the other department. Every 3 years, the secretaries have to move. And I was surprised that we quoted for Vikasini, which is a French technology, to be established in India. And there was an agreement between government of France and government of India that 30 of our scientists will be deputed to France and they will help in developing this liquid engine. Why it was done is because we wanted to have exposure. We didn't have that kind of money understanding. And the European agency didn't have sufficient scientists to work on it. And there was a need for them to compete with the US and Russia. So as a result, this technology got developed and we asked for it. They were very gracious to give that technology to us. But how to productionize that engines here in India? ISRO obviously cannot do it. So whether it goes to any industry, whether it is a PSU or a private industry, at least today ISRO has learned how to give away their technology to somebody else. Now whether it goes to HA, whether it comes to other consortia, is not important. Rather than keeping it with themselves, now at least there is a mindset that ISRO scientists are ready to give away. Otherwise they wanted to do everything. For whatever good or bad reasons, but they were not ready to part. The PSLV is going on for last 5 years. HAL L&T consortia has won that. So similarly, the other consortia could have won the SSLV also. Now, what I am saying is that in '89 there was no government procedure available for how to really enter a contract with the consortia. And it was only Mr. T.N. Seshan who said that if technically scientists are finding that Godrej MTR quotation or the bid is technically qualified, we should not reject it. Otherwise, there was a proposal to reject our bid because it was two companies coming together and there could have been a cartel in the future days. That was the intent of disqualifying us. But he said, no, let's encourage, let's see what happens further. Whether they are able to come as a L1, so that's what any tender requires. And we fortunately turned out to be L1 also in that, and we won it. Today we have produced more than 250 engines. Nobody knows about this consortium. There is no document between two of the companies. But he found out jointly and severally responsible. That's a term what he coined. And he said if A company fails, the B has to take over. If the B fails, A has to take over. And we have parallel capabilities developed within two of us. So that at any time, if any company has any difficulty in producing, the other company takes over. So far we have delivered, the peak is 20 engines in a year without any difficulties. So consortia works, there is a precedence, so it is not. PSLV itself is a consortia which has been. Now coming to your question, how do we really build a supply chain? So when we started working or when L&T or the Vachannagar, 3-4 of us MTR, in the 80s we took a decision to enter into the Indian space program. Now, knowingly that this program is going to struggle for next 10, 15, 20 years before any of the launch vehicles or satellites are going to become a commercial success. So any PSLV, GSLV, when you see it, it has a D1, D2, D3, the development with 3 launch vehicles or 3 satellites, and then it comes the C series, the commercial series. But the D series doesn't happen as frequently as the C series. Because after every launch or after every satellite you commission it, there are a lot of learnings, there are a lot of design changes, there are a lot of users, they find that there is something more is required in this. So you have to keep on accommodating till it matures. And the technology like you have TRL1, TRL2, you have to go up to TRL10. Similarly, after the TRL you have the manufacturing readiness. technology has been established by C1, C2, C3, but can a company like us produce 20? The demand for the commercial is not that when we produce the first Vikas engine in 5 years, ISRO really clapped. They were not expecting. And 3 years our engines were waiting for the test facilities to get ready. They never put money, assuming that Indian company cannot do it in 7 years or 8 years. That's the time frame they gave it in our contract. But somehow it helped us and we could make it in 5 years. Now 3 years the engine was waiting. So that means 3 years you cannot even think of getting the D2 mission engine also in progress. But unless the D1 undergoes a test, how can you produce a D2? If there are any changes required, you have to wait for it. Today that phase has gone. Most of our launch vehicles, our satellites, our other missions like Chandrayaan, Gaganyaan and other successfully they have been ground tested. So we don't wait for the actual Gaganyaan to take place. The engines for that has already been produced. The various subsystems have been produced. So developing a supply chain today is not a problem. For us, when we were trying to go to one of our very old and for a Godrej for 100 years, he was supporting us in very critical machining and forming. But when he asked a question, what quantity you are going to give it to us? When we say that 1 in 3 years or 1 in 4 years, which company will get attracted unless you have a very open heart and you want to do a contribution to the projects of national importance. Now, a large company like Godrej, 24 different products, one product doesn't work, 20 products are going to make money, it's okay. But for a small company, if he doesn't have what he has established, how can he go into a commercial? How can he have a success every year? So that phase has already been overcome. So today, developing a supply chain has not become a real challenge. Our real challenge is that now, how do we have a consistency in quality? How do we really ensure that the processes what has been laid out is being met at every stage? Because there is a lot of vulnerability. Everybody is today trying to grow. Everybody is expanding. The defense and the space and the civil aviation markets have really gone up. Previously, what we were doing in 2000, we started in 85, 15 years, my turnover was only 32 lakhs in 2000. After 15 years, the space turnover was only 32 lakhs. Now, how can a company justify? And that for a small industry, it will not be 32 lakhs. It will be 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs. It is not possible. So now the volumes are going up. So there is a lot of race how to really grab the skill. So all the supply chain partners are looking, you develop and we will take it. You develop and we will. So we have become, the large companies have become like a training ground because there is no formal training which is available. ISRO cannot do it. ISRO has their own institute in Trivandrum where they are now developing engineers. But there is no operators and there are no practicing engineers. ISRO is developing the design engineers, not the practicing engineers. What we want is the blueprint to blue skies. How it is going to happen is that somebody has to make a equipment, somebody has to make a part, assemble, test it. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the startups and the other new companies who are coming up with their own innovation and different products, what we are importing. In PSLV today, we have almost 96% indigenization, but still 4 to 5% is imported items. GSLV, our import content is very high, 28 to 30%. Now these companies are coming forward and saying that we are capable of developing this 4% or 6% in PSLV and 30% in DSL. We don't import, pass on those orders. But how to qualify them? I have a product which is, they feel that it is suitable for it, but the product has to undergo test. The space simulation, we have only one high altitude test chamber. ISRO is completely busy. Any product which gets developed with any of the startup or something, high altitude test chamber takes about 4 to 5 years to build and cost about 4 to 5,000 crores. That's the big money which you have to put in that. So startups and other MSMEs or even companies like us, 4,000 crores to spend on one test facility, which for an engine, how many engines we are going to develop? 1 or 2 only. For that entire year, you have to keep on maintaining such large white elephants. So that's the second problem, that if I have a product also ready, where it will get tested. Fortunately, the ISRO has come out, the 4th stage of PSLV is now used as a test chamber, and you carry after all your mission satellites are launched, This is actually orbiting for whatever 5, 10, 20 days the fuel is available in that, and you put all these experimental things which you cannot do it at ground. Actually, you test it in space, which is what is actually required. That's the ultimate aim. So these are all the issues in developing a supply chain today.
Right.
And then lastly, I think we have focused too much on technology, but we are not focused on how to make our own standards, codes. Like NASA has its own code. ISRO is not able to produce this codes.
Yeah.
Now, why these codes are required? It is very easy. NASA will give us access to use their codes at a cost. But those are written for suitability in US. The materials which are available today in India, the processes which are available today, the machines which are available today, the test chambers what we are going to have it here in India today, are they compatible with that? They are not. And then the struggle starts. So we are trying to do everything as per them. When you are trying to do everything as per NASA, your innovation comes down. Whatever are your ideas, I think that the medical oxygen is good for using in the cryogenics. Whereas the space oxygen is different. But if I use it, and there is a company startup who is trying to work on this using medical oxygen, which is plenty available, cheapest. If you use and try to make a space oxygen, it will be the cost is 4 to 5 times higher. Not available everywhere. We are talking about Africa and other countries. Do they have this kind of a medical oxygen in plenty? But not the space oxygen. So how do we use it? So these are all the issues which are coming up, and we should focus on to our the codes and standards, and same thing with the military also. Everywhere we are going and using the American standards or the French standards or something.
Right. So if I can summarize what you're saying is we need to start investing in the first principles.
That's right.
Instead of just adopting, we need to have our own first principles done right. But there's my question, sir. Don't you think that at this juncture is going to be tough? I'll give you an example. We are talking about, let's just move beyond space also a little bit. We are talking about AI and AI development. But at the core of AI and AI development is the hardware that powers the AI, which at the end of the day is built by a company like an NVIDIA or the likes. And since we as a country or we as an ecosystem have not invested in those first principles, we will have to fall back on the standards that the Americans are giving us. So that gap, how do we cater to that gap? Exactly what the Chinese have done. They have done it everything on their own.
Right.
But they have invested that much number of days, effort and money, and they have tirelessly done it, doing it from scratch. They've invested in the first principle, if I'm right in saying that.
Yes.
So do we start from scratch, or how do we leapfrog this?
No, we have to start from the scratch.
Right. There's no other
alternative. And the current focus on making the silicon chips in India, the silicon foundry, investing into rare earths, because these are all extensively used on any solar panel. If you see, the entire thing is with the rare earths.
Correct.
There is no common material which is used on the solar panel.
Correct.
And if that we get choked up, even though we have our own beautiful designs of satellites and the opening up of solar panels after reaching space and the design of solar panels, but for want of that rare earth, so now the focus has come. Government of India is investing into the rare earths. The next, this one is the machinery. See, if you come to Godrej, we have more than 400 machining centers or different machines in the aerospace division of this. Out of that, 90% are imported because the Indian machine tools is not able to produce the accuracies, the axes, the automation, and the quality what is required, the repeatability what is required, catching the data and documenting it online. Otherwise, it's very tedious. So when we made the first part of this Vikas engine in 91 and 92, it used to take 8 to 10 hours. Today, the latest machines are doing it in hardly 30-40 minutes. So where is 8 hours and where is 40 minutes? So if we have to be in global business, then the entire infrastructure is required to be there. The tool, jigs, fixtures. How many tool, jigs, fixtures? Everybody is today doing for the auto industry, but nobody is ready to come and understand these different materials and different tolerances and different requirements in the space. So we have to develop everything. So at Godrej, at L&T, at Tata, at Anand Technologies, you go and we have to do everything to what is required from scratch. Now that way we cannot grow.
Correct.
Because then our economics will completely change and collapse.
Correct.
So there has to be a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 system, which now all of us are trying to build it. The SIDM, NSIL, all those names what you have put, they're all working towards it. It's going little slow. We need to bring in a lot of energy into it. And to bring that energy, there has to be a success. Unless and until we have Uganda as a success, I don't think it is going to happen. Unless and until the startup ecosystem works, the Skyroad rocket is just getting ready. If that really flies a satellite into the space, I think then the energy will come into this.
So I think talking about that itself, Devlin, I'll come to you on this. We were speaking about choke points quite a bit, and sir mentioned a lot of choke points where we need to invest on the first principle. Now you've been a downstream player for quite some time. You've been invested in this, and we are very well aware. If you can also just talk about your choke points in the downstream ecosystem. From where I sit and where I see, data is the biggest choke point, and our friends all over the place can just switch off the taps and the data is gone. So for a company like yours, who is dependent on data to be flowing without any problem, how do you prepare for that, A? And how do you also prepare for any eventuality that happens, which can blockade not just your data flow, but any other codes, applications, basically your entire pipeline. How do you protect your pipeline?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. Just as a background to what we do, we are at the intersection of using space data for building marine applications. So we are between space and the deep blue sea, and we have been using SI and NASA data. I have so far not used ISRO data. I would just break up the choke points one by one. And I would, before the choke point, I would like to say, somewhere, I don't know when we met in Chennai, some 2 years back. In 2019, we were selected for a ESA program, European Space Agency Copernicus Masters Program. It was a meet of all space startups. I'm telling this just to emphasize how it is different in India and what is lacking in India for a space startup ecosystem. When we first qualified for the program, we gathered. In a 2-day span, they made us pitch our use case. They made us meet the various data providers. European Space Agency has something called DIAS. It's similar to AWS, a mini form of AWS, where you can do a one-to-one setting, discuss use case, discuss various data access, and really understand where and in what format, cost, implication, etc. You get onboarded, and there you go. I mean, then when the startup founders or the startup people go back home, they exactly know what is my cost of data, what's my access points, what I have to develop, what I'm getting, etc., etc. This is 2019. Till now, we don't have that in India. There have been multiple discussions about, or multiple such conversation goes on the fact that we have now access to OceanSat data. OceanSat is something that we use for our applications. But be it Bhunidhi, be it Bhuvan, your continuous access of data is completely lacking. There is no data allowed. There is no open API that I can access. How does it affect my case? Is exactly so. Tomorrow, if SI and NASA decides to really switch off their tabs, I will have to build everything from scratch. Yeah. Starting from data aggregation, starting from my processing, starting from my downstream, your heuristics and everything, right? So that's my problem. And again, at the end of the day, apart from that, the other choke points have been working with departments per se. So what we do is downstream applications. We are making some applications that are around the marine department, for a fisheries department, for the Department of Science, Department of Space. I feel at times I'm competing against the government. Why I say so is that there are applications that governments have built for the ecosystem. Completely commend them on that. But when we go to the departments and asking, we have already built this. There are some kind of, say, we did with sea surface temperatures, we did with chlorophyll, some kind of parameterized data. When we access those data points, we are questioned why we need this. And why we, how will you use it? We explain our use case. The answer comes back saying that we've already built it. Why you're building it? Can you help us in, promoting our application? There is some state capacity problem already existing. I don't think governments can really do the last mile supply chain better than a startup. Government has some strengths, we have some strengths. So there's a reason that we exist, and there's a reason that they exist. So if that competition can be dropped off, and if there is a way to really, and I don't blame them, there is no set procedure in our geospatial lab where a government can procure our services. Data as a service, where public and private companies are really sharing the data on a single platform. There is no such set standard where I can talk to ISRO department and saying that, hey, look, I have this, take it forward, use it in your subsystems. It's not there. There is no clarification on private licensing, IP, your liability framework. What happens if something happens? Who takes care of what? Commercialization of data, exporting. We are in the downstream sector. We export data insights. So we were doing we were working with the UN. We were designing something for Sri Lanka, very similar in the marine space. The project duration was 3 years. For COVID came, so it became 2 years. In the 2 year span, I spent almost 7 months just orbiting between the departments here and departments in Sri Lanka, because nobody really knew whether a startup in India, analyzing marine data, can export that data to the fishermen in Sri Lanka. Similar questions from both the parties, and I was running in between just to get the clarification and that I'm not leaking any sensitive design documents. So there are those export for upstream sector. I think export for data services also needs to be clarified. They can vet it, but as of today, I cannot go to a department or cannot go to a single window where I say, hey, look, this is my service and this is what the applications are, this is what the use case are. Can you please vet it? I don't get the clearance. There is nobody I can speak to.
Isn't in space supposed to?
So supposedly, but I'm not too sure. It's not there in their guiding documents.
Right.
So those cases, post that we have very much stuck to the Indian subcontinent, so I've not really faced that case, and whatever I'm doing outside is POC. But I believe I'll soon be facing that situation again. I believe there is somebody who should take care of it in space. I don't think your Space India NSL should take care of it. They should ideally take care of, but there should be one single window where all these things can be clarified, and I don't have to really orbit. And the state of departments in India. There are multiple departments having like for example, we do seaweed farming. So there is multiple departments handling various parts of the ocean. So it makes my life very difficult as well. I'm kind of just knocking too many doors at the same time, the same request. So I think more or less those are the choke points. If they can standardization of data format I can download. Real-time data is completely not accessible for us. What I can access is archive data, but archive data doesn't really help me build my use case or validate my use case.
That you're speaking specifically for the Indian resources or generally?
No, I do have access to, I can pay a data of ESA and NASA, I can get the data downloaded to my AWS at a blink of an eye. Right. I don't have that issues, right?
Correct.
Here, I can download archive data, but if I have to really, my business runs on a thrice a day access to data. Correct. I cannot, run a business with the current kind of data layers that is provided to me at this point.
So, which means that does this kind of a situation, which is stifling you on a standardization thing, it's also stifling you on terms of the access to data and also dependence on global data sets. Does that sort of push you in the upstream market as well to sort the upstream yourself?
Yeah, hopefully I wouldn't be able to do what I do in the downstream sector if I have to go upstream.
Right.
I probably will end up depending on my private startup friends who are in Indian startups who are in the upstream sector and not talk to ISRO. That would be my first choice because it's easier to really deal with them.
No, when I say push, either do it yourself or get somebody else do it for you.
Yeah, so Pradeep is not here, but Sarsho typically kind of had the same journey, right? So so upstream is dictated by the downstream.
Absolutely right.
The needs of the downstream sector. You see all the hyperspectral imagery on drones because your downstream sector needed it. So the upstream mechanism is currently dictated by the downstream. So yeah, so tomorrow I definitely need hyperspectral data for my coming use cases. I'm looking at working with be it Pixel, be it Satshore, to really define my use case. So those are my first people to reach out to at this moment.
Right. So those are your areas how you will be able to solve your choke points.
Correct.
From a data perspective and from a standardization
Yeah,
perspective.
but it should not be this difficult. It should not be really. I mean, I'm a non-GIS person.
Yeah.
I am in the GIS sector, but I'm a non-GIS person. I should not have to really, knock so many doors to get access to GIS data and to really, understand where to go. Where I mean, it should be a single window portal and you can give. I'm not asking you to give me all the data. You can scan it. Just give me something that I can build my use cases on.
Right. So, and I'm sure capacity building is also a big part of your problem area.
Yeah. So that
Not just with your workforce, but with also your users.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. For us, we work very, very close to the ecosystem, to the coastal ecosystem. So a lot of our time goes into kind of translating the very, very data science kind of problem into a very community problem, community understandable thing. So that's where my majority of time goes.
Yeah.
So there is a difference. That's a separate forum. I can talk about it. But again, so if I have to really create niche, localized insights or localized products for a community, I really should not have to spend so much time bothering about where the data is coming from. Talking about space skill sets, I definitely believe what Sir was saying. I can. There is no such like I do have a very strong GIS team, but even then, getting the GIS resources, it has been a challenge for us, especially maybe because for the case of the kind of work that we do, marine, and there's a lot to really explore this. We are doing whatever. I mean, there is no set models for us to do. You have set models for doing a lot of land observation data, but ocean observation is really new. I mean, we really have to do everything from scratch. So for us, getting access to skills are difficult. We have been talking to universities in developing a kind of a use case from the second semester onwards to really have students.
So what I constantly hear from you is non-standardization in everything that you're doing. I mean, I think that is what is inherent with the sunrise sector, right? With that itself, I'll come to you, Varun. You've been quite an influencer in the capacity building on the user side, on the academia side, and as I was just mapping the entire thing while he was presenting, that space industry is a small subset.
Right.
The users put together to the space industry make the space economy.
Right.
And now when we have the space economy, I just mapped that then there are supporting pillars to the space economy like the semiconductor ecosystem,
Yes.
the rare earth ecosystem which Sir also mentioned, the quantum ecosystem which will be a future pillar.
Yes.
Then you have the education, the ancillary and the auxiliary industries supporting. Of course, the law and regulation and the capacity building.
Right.
So now, specifically looking at the capacity building and education, we've also seen, even at the India Space Congress, when we were talking about the quantum that you know was somebody moderated it, the panel on quantum, the massive gap there also, which was being talked about, was ये लोग कहाँ से आएंगे? काम करने के लिए लोग भी तो चाहिए. I want to build my company, but where are my boys going to come from?
Right.
I need to create the ecosystem where my boys and girls are going to learn about these ecosystems, are going to get those hands-on, and then contribute positively in the industry.
Right.
So when you're building this kind of a thing, and this being a sunrise sector, nothing is set.
Right.
She's been going on and on about everything not being standard. How do you put this in perspective? How do you create things or courses, probably, let's start with courses,
Okay.
or programs which look at least 2 decades or a decade ahead of time and start building capacity right from now?
Okay. So what I'll do is like I'll draw from my experience and I'll draw parallels to the defense and the aerospace industry, which I currently work more hands-on in, both in terms of capability development as well as capacity building. So to answer or to bring some perspective to the capacity building point, I actually approach it hand in hand with the capability development side of things. And I think it's actually a good thing that we're talking about a growing space economy for India, which is a sunrise sector. And we are also almost just maturing in our defense economy to some extent on this brink right now, and moving and overlapping into the space economy side of things. So what we have very recently achieved on the defense economy side of things, or the defense technology side of things, has been a good coming together of the capabilities we've managed to develop and the capacity we've managed to achieve. All of this was mostly done without much of formal programs being available, or as you said, the courses being available. So it's a maturing of these two ecosystems which has brought us to this point. What this has presented us with right away is to be able to formalize this into a programs approach, where, as you said earlier, leapfrogging, right? So, and Sir said that starting from scratch. Now, luckily, here is a point where we don't have to go absolutely back to the first principles. We can draw from this point onwards and bring in a synergy between the adaptation of first principles as well as starting out from a point we've matured. So it's a milestone that has been achieved. As a part of that, and like you're aware of it, Vaidya sir is aware of it, coincidentally all three of us serve in the academic advisory of one of the most recent programs that has been formed into furthering capacity building for defense technology. So Symbiosis Skills University in Pune very recently has not only announced a BTech program in defense technologies, the intake has already started. From what I am aware of, as per the latest data, they've already filled more than half of their admissions batch. The courses are set to begin in a month's time. And as much as I'm aware, this is the first ever initiative as well as effort in a very formal manner to bring in capacity building to fulfill the needs of what is currently being faced as a gap by the industry, as well as moving ahead into the future approach of things. So definitely, like, the first batch of these students will graduate 4 years from now. So we are already looking at what the industry is going to need 4 years from now, and we are trying to make sure that that gap is bridged into their training currently. Another very important point of this program, based on what we've been discussing, is that we want the students who would be, nurtured with these programs and via these batches, first and foremost to come out as good systems engineers, right? Because ultimately that's the whole game, at least in the defense technology side of things, and I'm sure moving into the space technology and the space economy side of things. You want people to understand first principles, you want them to understand a developmental approach, and ultimately you want them to understand the end goal, which is the use case. And now is that bridging point between achieving that use case based on a system that has to be put together, and it has to work in achieving those goals. So this is where, as you said, there's always been a gap on the capacity building front. And from us and from many of the other partners who are a part of this initiative, it's a very humble attempt to try and bridge this gap, get people who are specialized in this kind of not only the technical know-how or the technical skilling, but also the domain they're going to be working in. What kind of additional skills or additional approaches are required by them. They need to understand what they're working on is mission critical. It cannot fail. What they're working on is going to have long-term implications based on the use cases. So failure is not an option. Strict timelines of development, strict timelines of deliverance are really important here. And that is where capacity building which is going to aid capability development for the defense sector, has become paramount with a program like this. Drawing this parallel and maybe overlaying it onto the space economy approach, the approach which we would need to build here would be something similar to bridge this gap which is already there, and we want to bridge it not only for now but for the future to come. Specialized programs, and now of course I gave you the example of a BTech in defense technology, but it doesn't mean that every program needs to be a 4-year BTech program.
Right.
We can have and we need to have anything starting from as short and actionable as 3 months at a time for people who want to cover a specific gap, or mid-career professionals who only need maybe somewhere around 3 to 6 months to switch from one domain to another. And then of course building up a future workforce which currently once they are put into that area of study, after about 3 to 4 years, we have a ready crop and at scale available to augment what the industry is going to need at that point. And that should hopefully bridge the gaps like what Devlina is facing right now, where one may be lucky to find the right fit of a team and it would work. But what happens when, let's say, one of your crucial team members decides to leave, and maybe for a good reason, they want to move on to something else, they want to retire, move on to a domain that is different from yours. What happens then? How do you tap into the existing available workforce? In fact, that was the very basis of the program I was talking about. And I very clearly remember Vaidya sir and I were in that meeting when this very point came up. That the whole idea is that there needs to be a resource pool somewhere where you can just tap into and pick up someone with a shortened time of orientation required by that domain, if not like a completely off-the-shelf kind of an approach available. So that would be my take on capacity building and in building of courses, building of capacity programs that would help bridge this gap.
So just to quickly follow up on that, do you see capacity building and capability building as two different things? So let me be a little more specific articulating that. When I say capacity building, is it only limited to the building of capacity with the student crop? Or are we also focusing on building capacity at the user end? Because as Devlina also mentioned, she's working against the government or the user sometimes. And it would also be at multiple levels that the brick wall is harder because the user is unable to see what you're trying to do for them.
Agreed.
So would that capacity building be this two-pronged approach at the user end as well as the student?
Yes.
And would capability building be a part of this as well?
Definitely. In fact, just taking that ahead, building onto that, it could be a multi-pronged approach,
Right.
Because you have capacity building on the creators or the builders or the innovator side of things, where you need people to come together to be able to build systems. And of course, the technologies or the supply chains behind them as well. On the other end, you are going to need to orient the users as well, because in many, if not most cases, they are not going to be oriented to these new technologies, new systems. And you have to actually look into that need as well. Build up the capacity there too, otherwise you hit a brick wall. You have the right workforce, you have the right systems, but the moment you go to the user, and I have seen this happen, experiences from the defense domain, where the user is either not aware of something like this existing, so they don't know what to do with it. And more often than not, they may just say that, why fix something that's not broken? So if my existing, human oriented system is already working and I don't need to bother about modernizing this, why should I even bother looking into this new system? And that is what holds us back, because here we are finally, linking all of this to a growing space economy.
Yes.
So if the users are not sensitized and they are also not parallelly built up in terms of capacity, again, you end up facing a brick wall. That's out of their capacity being built up, the capability development part again comes into play.
So what Sir was also mentioning, the testing facilities,
Right.
which are huge investments, which can go into its own project cycle.
Right.
So now, since you're also handling the defense side of things, and an example that we were discussing just prior to this, where somebody is building a bomb, let's say,
Right.
but is unable to test the actual explosives.
Correct.
How that is obviously a capability that needs to be built for the ecosystem.
Yes.
And like I'll draw a parallel from that. This is very particularly for a defense problem statement, but this could also be equally true for a space problem statement. That I have built a technology, but I'm not able to test it.
Correct.
Now, will this sort of building up of capability of testing, could this be developed with the user? Sit down with the user and say, okay, look, you have this kind of clearances, you have this kind of, in the case of defense, you have the
Right.
ordnance access.
Right.
You have the access of a testing facility.
Right.
Why don't you come up and sit down with us and build a COE
Right.
for that matter and give us this access and help us co-create the technology for all we care?
Right. I agree with you. So this has in fact been a major issue. Like I'll just shed a little more light on this. What has been happening is that when you have, let's say, capability developed on the industry side, and someone says that, okay, this is for defense applications, so we'll go ahead with the example of building a bomb. And I'll just take it a little further. Let's go into precision guided munitions in the defense area. When a startup comes and says that I have precision guided munitions, they are ready to be taken and inducted into service. And then you find out that because the control over the munitions domain in India is so tightly gripped, and for good reason, of course, because it's a very sensitive area to deal with, you realize that this startup has, while in principle perfected their technology, they have a projectile ready, they have their precision guided kit ready for this. They've even conducted simulation tests, they've conducted some real world tests of dropping this. You set a target, it drops at the right place. They've simulated the bomb having the right weight with dead weight being added. But there's no explosive in all of this because that capability and the capacity has been missing on the testing front. And the user is not aware that these guys need access to this very crucial aspect of testing. So they've never bothered about it. These guys are not aware that, okay, this is going to be a major part of my testing when I put up my technology or my solution for sale to the user. And that is where you lose, that at that very final point or that very final milestone, you lose out on your commercialization aspect coming in. And as a startup, it's a big hit that when you realize that, okay, the user was looking to procure, say, 100 pieces of precision guided munitions, and you thought you qualified for this. And at that point in time, you realize that your test has been inconclusive because of this last factor. So testing actually comes in as a very important factor on both the capacity building and the capability development side of things. And that has to be built up in parallel to this other side that we're talking about concurrently. Because if though that sensitization doesn't happen, if that real world use case feedback does not come into play, how do you know that this is actually field tested for use and ready for use?
Right.
So that gap also needs to be covered again with the help of capability and capacity building, where I think your example was spot on to have a COE-like approach and an actual action-oriented COE-like approach. That while the academic field is doing its bit in building up capacity, while industry is doing its bit in building up the capability, drawing from there, the users also need to be sensitized, trained, and made aware of the testing needs in a real-world scenario that are finally going to be required. It's going to be no different for the space economy and the space application side of things. It's critical applications. You can't leave it to chance. You can't say that I've run this on a simulator. You may have done that 1,000 times correctly, and your technology could still fail in the field if it is not field tested.
Right. Yeah. But then at the end, we are still speaking on a very technical side of things.
Right.
But on touching onto the non-technical side of things, Tanushree, I am sure the capacity building, and for me personally, I feel the need of building capacity with me and my co-founder right now in terms of the law, regulations, finances, and business development. Because many of us, people working in the space economy, are typically coming from the science backgrounds. When I say science backgrounds, I mean really technical, high-tech backgrounds, and we more often than less ignore the legal frameworks, or maybe we don't have the bandwidth to understand what it is that we need to be prepared for. So, since we are talking about capacity building and capability building, would you shed a light on how this could be institutionalized in the first place? How this could be a part of capacity building for the startups? Or let's say just start with what are the common pitfalls that we need to be aware of as the new upcoming sunrise sector?
Right. So at first we forget as to why we have regulations in place.
Sure.
So regulations in general, why we need it today is to provide stability and sustainability. I get my product, like she mentioned, I can develop one product and I can either export it or I want to import certain component for my product. So in terms of that, I may not need a policy, I may not need a regulation, it's okay. But I'm here talking about building an entire economy. Anything and everything, may be tech, may it be law, may it be policy, everything boils down to what is the kind of financial capacity that it has, how can that sustain economy, and so on and so forth. Now, like you mentioned, the term space lawyer itself is very much not known. A lot of people have questioned me in terms of what my career is about and what I do. It's regulating a very technical aspect. So of course, for me to regulate that or to know what it is, I need to learn on the technical side of it as well. Capacity building there is not just for companies within, but it's also for regulators.
Okay.
There's a certain background which these regulators come. Most of them are also having technical backgrounds, not knowing on how law and policy works. An approach of how an engineer looks at in terms of a simple wording is okay, you have either a certain definition or you have a certain way of working or looking to a problem is not how a lawyer works or how like a person who works in policy. We need to read between the lines very often. The entire point of how space economy is not only from a very national perspective, but also from an international perspective. We cannot let go of the aspect that it does very closely work with national safety and security, that defense is a part of it, and that it also sort of helps you become a national power in an international scenario. Capacity building, that question, I think we forget that space as a sector is complementary for a lot of other sectors as well, like maritime, like education, like our ATMs. All of these work on space and science satellite technologies.
Yeah.
So I think what needs to be done is, instead of looking at all of these segments within the space sector individually, there has to be like a holistic approach that we need to take. There has to be a course that helps people understand and learn not just on law, even on finances, even on risk. Investors need to be told about how the space sector works. So ultimately, I develop a technology or I develop a product which has zero commercial sense. Will an investor be really willing to buy that? Will an investor be ready to invest into that? So engineers, along with building tech, also we need to be made aware of other sectors that complement, like law, regulation, insurance. And for that is why we need a policy in place or an act in place, so that this is some sort of like gives a framework or helps you sustain your economy.
But then, in your experience, you've worked with a couple of space startups, and you've seen a lot of others also. What are the common pitfalls that generally people are going to like, this is going to be an issue?
So everything that we discussed on right now is something that I faced. I've been glad, or I'm really grateful to have been worked on India's first private suborbital launch. I used to work with Skyroot Aerospace earlier, and later on I also worked with a satellite company. We recently launched India's first hosted payload. Now, I am talking about building a satellite, which is not just a simple box. It has a lot of other components. It has one of the most important component, that is radio. So any radio equipment is very essential, because how else do I communicate with my satellite? I asked one of my engineers to just look into the policy perspectives. I was obviously doing my own research, and I was in contact with the relevant authorities and regulators. But a simple look at the DGFT's website, and you look at radio equipments, you then have active radio equipments and other radio equipments. Moment it is an active radio equipment, it needs permission from the DOT. There's a wireless planning commission, department which handles all of this. On the DGFT website, if you take a look at it, it says as to for some components as free, or some components as prohibited, or some components as restricted. Understanding the different nature of all of these things is very important in the first place. Secondly, it says that, okay, permission is required from DGFT. We forget that as an engineer, he just took into consideration that, okay, if I get the permission from DGFT, or there's a waiver from DGFT, I can import it as it is, unaware of the fact that WPC comes into place. Now, especially in this growing, like the space sector, as we are talking it as a sunrise sector, it's more essential that I am first to the market, and my technology also sustains. So
First to the market also.
yeah, so
Okay.
from my concept to market has to be very fast. If I am able to sort of sustain that, I'm also able to dictate policies not only at a national level, but also at an international level. Take the example of US or Japan when it comes to space resources. So not being aware of all of these gaps, and then the entire role of InSpace being like a single authorization entity, it needs to coordinate. From my experience, of course, it has been challenging, but I also got enough of support from them. The problem is we do not, or we are not aware of who all are or are a part of this entire thing. There's also, if we also use batteries, so environmental damage also comes into place. Organizations also have to maintain compliances regarding that. So there are so many divisions that are complementary that we're not aware of. All of these have to be consolidated. And also taking advantage of different import and export schemes. These are things that Indian startups need to be aware of. Like Chaitanya mentioned in one of his papers about the export capital goods, I think it's ECGP. Yeah. So most startups are not aware of these things. So bringing them all together, making them understand as to what our national goals are, where do we see our economy. It should not be like we over-predict and under-deliver. So not just on the very simple legal problems, but helping them navigate this
Right.
is more important. So as simple as IP. Like you mentioned about My3. These are nothing but bilateral grants. You have India and you have Australia. Similarly, you have a lot of these programs that run between Europe and India, or certain European nations and India. What we are not aware of is, as soon as these are incubated in some other country, the first requirement is that the IP has to rest, or that component or that technology has to be registered in that country for you to get certain grant. Further, there are also thresholds that investments have to come from that particular region. Ultimately, once you give your tech away, you're also losing out on your ownership of that tech. So how do you commercialize that? Very important, because from my experience, at times when certain members are having conversations with engineers, what happens is they're very naive in sharing of what technology is.
Sure.
It becomes very simple as, okay, somebody has come to me with a doubt, and it's my duty to explain them. What you don't understand is actually you're transferring tech, you're transferring data. So I believe that startups have to be made aware of what the current scenario is, and that there needs to be a policy, of course, yes, but policy only comes into a place that we know, okay, that there is certain technology that is being developed, or India has that capacity. Because over-regulation is also not good. So I'm not saying hand-holding. I would say there needs to be a certain direction. In case of any doubts, if there is a single entity that is able to communicate with other departments, it makes the jobs of startups very simple because you do not have the bandwidth. Companies like Godrej have different teams, have different kind of techs, have different products, and they have that bandwidth both in terms of human resources as well as finances to sort of hire lawyers, to hire people from finance backgrounds. That's not the case with startups. Raising money is another issue altogether. So even a simple due diligence for raising money is a different thing. But
So I think we need to add a full module in our BTech. On the last one, just one comment from each of the panelists. Sir, I'll start with you itself. What is the one enabler that we need to start building now for the next 10 to 15 years so that not leapfrog, but we are at least able to catch pace?
In my opinion, it is a skill which is required. Otherwise, everything will fall in line. But if there are no people who are ready to work, nothing is possible. We may have only ambition, but reality it will not come. So, building a talent pool is the first and foremost which is required from us.
I think yours is done.
It helps we come from the same academic advisory panel.
Right.
So,
Your comment then, just to compliment them.
I mean, nothing more than just agreeing with what Sir has said, that it has to start out there. But parallelly, it also, I think one major part would be what Tanushri covered, that sensitizing the students on other areas besides the technology part as well. So they are far better equipped to quickly adapt to the organization that they are joining and to quickly adapt to the projects that they would be a part of.
Right.
Of course, adding to that, again, sensitizing and capacity building on the user side of things so that there's a smooth transition of the technologies and the systems going from creation stage to actual use cases.
So wider adoption. Your last comment, what we need to do to leapfrog or catch pace.
Yeah, I think I've spoken enough about the data access, but on the capacity development point, I believe what is important is also for the capacity development or development of the government departments. Because if I have to really work with the departments and they're issuing me a tender, and when I'm putting in the proposal, which has a large aspect of that it's a technical aspect where I'm getting data and using the data and there's a cost component, most of them don't really understand why that cost is there in the first place. So if I have to really work with the department, I think department workforce should also be trained enough to really understand what are the applications, implications of DS data, to various access protocols.
Your point?
I think there's a lot that needs to be done,
Oh,
like
one-
you mentioned. No, so to summarize it, I think letting startups know or educating them on what are the requirements at regulatory or compliances is one.
Sure.
You cannot suddenly have an act and be like, okay,
Sure.
you've not complied with this, these are the penalties.
Sure.
They need to be made aware of, they need to be given that time. So along with technology development, our policy and development towards having a codified act is also very important. Because if we are all talking about sustaining economy, because space is very much a part of the economy today. Almost everything is dependent on space today. So I think it's educating and bringing all the related segments together on single platform. Everybody needs to be on the
So you
same
mean,
table.
Teach lawyers the technology and teach technologies the law and bring them on the
I
same
think not
page.
just lawyers and tech. We forget what's most important is investments and
No,
money.
of course. So the
So
non-tech.
bringing all these segments
Yeah, yeah.
together on a platform
Yeah,
to help
yeah.
them understand as to where India's strategy is,
Right.
how commercial and government play a part of it, and then moving towards a policy and ultimately a codified act is
Right.
more important.
So you're essentially saying that giving the technologists the flavor of the investment cycles, not just the cycles, the ecosystem, the law ecosystem, the regulations, all of that to the technologists. What do you think? Is that easier or supporting the technology ecosystem with non-tech, with a flavor of technology?
I don't think I can give any answer to that. Nothing is simple, each has its own perks. But what's more essential is for them to know that these laws, regulations, policies are meant for their own protection. It's in fact, if I have
Right.
to, if I'm going and I'm selling my company to someone or it's
Yeah.
being acquired, ultimately there'll be a valuation of this tech.
Right.
If I've not registered my IP and I build great technology, it may be precision guided systems, it may be satellites, it might be as simple as ADCS components. If I do not have a value, if I don't have ownership, all of these issues stem up only later. So instead of having these regulatory and legal compliances as hurdles or bottlenecks, which do not let me enjoy the commercial side of it, if all of that has been taken care of from the
From
very
the
early
beginning, yeah.
start on, it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. So I think to conclude, following your presentation on controlled growth of Indian space economy, I think there's a lot of things that are going on simultaneously need to be done to support the space economy. If that is what we've seen, space economy overall will be a part of the space industry, the users, the doers, the regulators, the helpers, the financiers, everybody sitting together, and the other domains like we've talked about rare earths, generic funds, and everything else. While all of that is happening, we need to start focusing on protecting ourselves. That's the first thing we need to start doing, and also start building from scratch in a lot of critical areas where we need to have our first principles right. That would be my summary to summarize this great panel. Should I have a question? That would be the panel discussion. Over to you, Sumit.
Thank you so much, Advait, and thank you so much, Dr. Giri, and as well as the esteemed speakers for offering your valuable insights. The topic is indeed complex, and unfortunately, we did not get time to do the Q&A, but I invite all of you for the high tea at our recreation room, where we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you.